Welcome to Spiraling Soul
a podcast where we merge spirituality
and psychology.
I'm Casey.
And I'm Emma.
Congrats on beginning the spiral. In today's episode, we are talking about a topic that Emma and I both love. And we're so excited to talk about it. And this changed our lives. And I hope that it changes all of yours. We practice this like every single day, and this topic is that your thoughts are not you. You are not your thoughts.
Before we begin, let's talk about what even are thoughts? Where do they come from? What does it mean? So I was trying to think about how to start this, and the first thought that came to my mind is just from as early as birth, we've been shaped by our environments and the people that have surrounded us. Like as a baby, you soak up everything like a sponge. And it got me thinking, sometimes my thoughts sound like people I know, like caregivers or people that I was around a lot as a kid. Like, where do our thoughts even come from? Because a lot of what we think about, at least for me, comes from an external source, which I think is really interesting because it gives you the illusion that your thoughts are you, but they're not because they were shaped from other people.
Yeah, our thoughts are
Like pre programmed. I mean, think about everything you know right now as a human. It was all stuff that you learned, you absorbed. And so who's to say that your thoughts aren't just a part of that as well? Like what makes people think that their thoughts are them? It's because it's like your internal dialogue and you start to believe that that's you. That's your voice. But like how do you know for sure? So we're going to get into it coming up. But did you have anything to add?
yeah. And how do you know that your thoughts are even true? Yeah, everything that we know we were taught or we learned somehow. And sometimes as a kid, we don't come up with the right conclusions about a situation. And so it can create beliefs about the world or about ourselves that we just think are facts. Like they are fact to us. But how do we know that is true? How do we know what our caregivers or what someone else told us is true? And so this is the premise of this episode. Like you aren't your thoughts, like you're the observer of your thoughts. That was like a huge wake up call for me, is like I am just observing my thoughts. I can change my thoughts if I want to, and I don't have to believe the thoughts if I don't want to. Like every thought that we're having, we don't really choose thoughts that pop into our head, but we do choose to believe them.
Yeah, it's like when you're a kid, it's not that you didn't ever think when you were a kid for yourself, but it's more like you took everything that you absorbed at face value and believed it because that was the only thing you knew. And it starts to become kind of an issue because as you grow from a kid to a teen into adulthood, there's more and more input, and then they start getting kind of out of control, but you might not even realize they're out of control because you're identifying with them. And it's like, oh, these are my thoughts. So that's me. That's what I'm thinking. But you get to a point and you realize, like, do I need to identify with them? Because at least for me, like, as I got older, I became more and more aware of my anxious thoughts and like ruminations and intrusive thoughts, like negative thought patterns, things that keep popping up. That's not who I am though. So why do I keep thinking it? It's got my internal narration. It sounds like me, but it's not me because I'm at my core, I'm not anxiety. I'm a human who experiences anxiety. So it kind of just brings me to a little definition I want to throw in there. I really learned about this concept of the monkey mind that comes from Buddhism. And I just looked up the definition, and it's basically the restlessness of your thoughts and the inability to calm them. And we're going to talk a little bit more about mindfulness in a bit. So that kind of ties in with that just feeling of not being able to control your thoughts. But there are methods that can make it a little easier and help you kind of see that you don't need to identify with that and kind of just notice the chatter of your mind and that it's not who you are. Casey, I think you had an analogy that you wanted to throw in there.
Yes. Before I get into the analogy, when you're a kid, your perception of the world is so different. You have a big imagination, you have big dreams, and you feel like you can go after it and achieve it because no one has told you that you couldn't. And so as we get older, a lot of our true selves get beaten out of us, and a lot of our desires we feel like we can't have or we can't achieve. And here's an analogy: they put in a bucket crabs, and one crab tries to escape, and this happens. One crab tried to escape, but as soon as it's tried to start climbing up, other crabs would like pull them down or push them down. And then the crab would try again, and they'd pull and try it again. So then eventually the crab's like, okay, well, I guess I can't leave the bucket. No one's letting me leave this bucket. I guess it's not possible to leave the bucket. Maybe I shouldn't even think about leaving the bucket. Like, why am I trying to leave this bucket right now? And then they introduce a new crab. And now this new crab is trying to escape the bucket. And all of a sudden, that one crab that tried to escape before is starting to pull down this crab that's now starting to escape. So, why couldn't the crab leave? The only reason the crab isn't trying to leave anymore is because his like society is telling him that it's not possible or you can't, or they're dragging him down. And I think that's also another important message about your thoughts in your programming. Be like really careful of who you surround yourself with, or pay attention to who you surround yourself with, because if you're surrounding yourself with people that are always putting you down, you're going to start to believe that like there's something wrong with you, or that your true self like there's something wrong with. But maybe it's just like you haven't found your people. You're not like vibing with your people. And so you have to go out and like find people who are also are like who like you for you and lift you up. And when you're around positive people and people that support you, it starts to change your thoughts about yourself. And now all of a sudden, like you're around people who are also going out and achieving things, or they think you're awesome, and you start to believe that you can go out and achieve things and that you're awesome. So who you surround yourself with like really plays a big part in your thought processes as well.
Yeah, that's so true. And a lot of it does come from external resources. Sometimes you can't control it. You can't control how you were raised. You can't control what was told to you. You have a choice now if you're listening, hopefully. Yeah, so that's so true. And that's also why you have to start working internally as well, working on yourself internally to shift that inside of you so that the outside and the inside reflect each other.
Yeah. Because even if you're around people that like tell you you're awesome and lifting you up, you have to choose to believe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thoughts can become belief so fast because you think that your thoughts are you. But I think we're going to go over this a little bit. Your thoughts actually aren't you, which is a positive thing because that means you can shift internally your belief system and, yeah, like everything going on inside there, processing inside there. I think I'm going to transition a little and talk about if you're not your thoughts, then who are you? And I think you briefly touched on it earlier that if you're not your thoughts, it's because you're the observer of your thoughts. And the way I put it is you are aware of your thoughts, which means you're not them. It means you're an outside perspective watching them. You can refer to this as your consciousness or your inner voice, your soul, what you are at your core. That voice sounds a little different, or that part of you operates a little differently. I just wanted to add in a little quote that I found from a book that I listened to recently, The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer. There's nothing more important to true growth than realizing that you are not the voice of the mind, you are the one who hears it. Every time I hear a quote like that, it just speaks to me so much because it gives me hope because, oh, I'm not my negative thought patterns. I'm not this voice that narrates my day. At my core, I'm listening to that and then I can choose from there where to go. Once I kind of separated this part of me from my thoughts, because this is when I kind of started getting into spirituality and mindfulness. And I started to recognize this other part of me that was my daily narration, the one that would randomly bring up an anxious thought pattern and then keep trying to get into my brain and persist and everything like that. And once I started to recognize that voice was separate from me and that my true, like at my core, who I was the one witnessing that, I started to just kind of distinguish the observer from the other thoughts. And it seems like I'll call it like my consciousness. I can't think of a better word, my higher self, whatever, the voice inside me that I know is who I am at my core. It started to sound different to me in my head. Like it seemed like it was a different voice speaking to me. And so after practice with this, I feel like a lot of people might experience the same thing. You might get stuck in a negative loop, like, oh, I'm not good at this, oh, blah, blah. And then you catch yourself with and you hear the other voice that's like, no, we are not thinking that. That's not who we are. So yeah, I guess you can call that other voice thoughts also, but it seems to come from a different place than the head, like the mind. Like when I think of my daily narration or my anxious thoughts, it's like a little cogwheel in my head, but the other voice seems to be coming from like my soul, like my center, my heart center or something. I don't know how else to describe it, but
Yeah.
have you had that kind of like distinction with
Yes.
your voices in your head?
Yes. I feel like I have a lot of different thoughts. Sometimes it feels like it's my dad talking to me, or it's just like a random thought. The mind kind of thinks about the same exact stuff all the time. Like if you take a record of like your daily thoughts, you're basically thinking the same exact things over and over again. Nothing really new comes up unless something new is introduced. But yes, I have different voices. So there's the thoughts, and then I'll have like my higher self when that part of me is speaking to myself. It feels very nurturing and it feels calm and it feels positive and it's not anxiety. I also have like my future self. I feel like my future self will kind of talk to me sometimes. And also, I feel like my inner child will talk to me. So sometimes, like, things come up and I'm like, it feels like my child self is talking. There's like other voices that I have, and it's not like schizophrenia voices. It's just like I can kind of distinguish different parts of my soul or being or consciousness that are coming up. It honestly, it kind of feels like there's two different programs going on in my brain, and I'm trying to like add this new program like I'm a computer. Does that make sense?
The the visual I got when you said that was that traditional kind of thing that's in a lot of movies where there's an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other.
Yes. Yes, it feels like
Mhm.
that sometimes, like once you start becoming aware of your thoughts.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, for okay, so example, I was all depressed, I didn't want to shower, I didn't want to brush my teeth, and I was just going to sit there and sulk and be gross. And then it felt like my higher self was like, okay, I get it. You don't want to do this, but like I'm going to take over and I am going to take care of you. And like I'm going to help you. Like I'm going to get you in the shower. I'm going to wash your hair. I'm going to brush your teeth. It feels like a different side of me. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally feel that. Before kind of awakening or before becoming more mindful, there was not that distinction for me because I have a lot of anxiety. I mean, I've had depression too, but anxiety is my main beef in life. And it, I would have constant anxious thoughts and self doubt and insecurities that would constantly be circling. Like, I'm a huge ruminator. Thoughts just, they would always be telling me something negative. And before I discovered mindfulness or anything like that, I just believed it to be true. But yeah, now I have that distinction like you do too, where I'm able, like, even this week, I'm having feelings of self doubt, but then the voice inside me, or my inner voice, not my thoughts, not my monkey mind, my inner voice was like, is that true anymore? No, it's not. So we're not doing that anymore. It becomes easier. It's a practice. This whole journey of becoming more mindful is a practice, and it's not going to happen overnight. I only learned the word mindfulness like 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm still learning and growing. And
And I think that's a good segue into how your thoughts create your reality. Because if you keep having the same thoughts over and over again, for example, like my freshman year of college, I would do something that I thought was annoying or like ugly, and I'd be like, oh, I hate myself. Or I'd mess up and I'd be like, oh, I hate myself. I suck. And that was like my friends and I used to say that all the time. Like that was a big catchphrase of ours. And one day I I think I probably learned something about your thoughts. And if you're constantly repeating that, like your brain doesn't know that that's not true. If you
mm-hmm.
keep feeding it, I hate myself, I hate myself, I hate myself, your brain is going to believe that. And you are going to act in a way like someone who hates themselves acts. And once I decided, like, I'm not saying that anymore, I'm not gonna say I hate myself because I don't hate myself. Like, I love myself. Oh my God. I just unlocked something in my brain. I went to a hypnotherapist, and one thing that we did in hypnotherapy is she planted a seed in my mind of I love myself. And she was like, if you keep watering this seed, it's going to grow. And so she made me visualize a garden inside of my mind. And she was like, you're going to plant this seed, and we're going to plant another seed, and we're going to keep watering it. And the more you focus on it, the more it will grow. And since I went to my life started to change drastically after that. Like I started to act as if I was someone that loved myself. And it didn't happen like right away. It wasn't like, okay, now I'm going to do everything for myself that is good for me. Like it starts slowly, but the more you water a thought, it will grow and it will create like new neural pathways, which is like neuroscience if you want to dig deeper into this topic. Um, but yeah, like what you choose to believe and keep thinking, it will grow and you will start acting in ways to reaffirm this thought and belief.
Mm-hmm. And was that
Yeah,
everything
I'm
of
done.
that thought? I
Yeah.
think that's actually a really good segue because you were talking about thoughts creating reality. And first of all, I feel the same. Like before I learned all about spirituality and things like that, I was so identified with my anxieties and my insecurities. Like I don't even know who that girl was
Yeah.
2019 and before that. Like that was an entirely different version of me. Um, that I was
Yeah.
identifying with all the negative parts of me. So, your thoughts create your external reality because it's kind of like pattern recognition. This is something I learned about one of my cognition classes, confirmation bias. You're choosing to see what you think is already being shown to you, like in a certain way. Like if you think something is true, you're going to look for ways to confirm that it's true. We'll talk about some ways to like shift your patterns of thinking to be more positive or more, well, not even more positive, but just more aware, because we're not about toxic positivity here. We're not telling you to never think a single bad thing again, but it's just a matter of not identifying with it. So I'll get into that in a little bit. But I was also going to just mention one of my classes I took in college. It was a mindfulness class. And by the way, I have a definition for mindfulness, just so all the listeners are fully aware. Merriam-Webster says mindfulness is the practice of maintaining a non-judgmental state of heightened or complete awareness of one's thoughts, emotions, or experiences on a moment-to-moment basis. Yeah, it's basically just being in touch with yourself.
Just
um,
being aware of the thoughts that you're having.
yes. And it's so interesting in this class. Something that really stuck out to me is the set triangle. It's a triangle. I keep trying to do a triangle, um, which it stands for sensations, emotions, and thoughts. Basically, your thoughts, your feelings, and your body are all affect each other. They're all interconnected. And that's why we did a lot of meditations in that class. And that's why we did a lot of body scans, because then we were able to pinpoint, okay, what am I feeling in my body? So, for example, I'll say an example of me. When I'm anxious, I get a pit in my stomach, like my stomach kind of is hurting. So, I started to notice more and more my stomach is tense, like my stomach, like it feels like there's a knot in there or something. Well, how is that connected to how I'm feeling? I'm feeling anxious. And what's my coming from that? Anxious thought patterns. So it's all interconnected. And a lot is also stored in your body, in your cells, like trauma is stored there. Major experiences are stored in your body's cells. It's there. So that's why it's so hard to overcome certain thought patterns, because it's so ingrained in the body. But practicing mindfulness, becoming more aware, is going to help shift away from that. And it's just a matter of also doing a lot of body work as well.
And like you can tell how your thoughts and your feelings affect your body. Like for example, like when I get stressed, I get knots like all over my neck, all over my shoulders. Like I know when I'm feeling stressed or if I'm having stressful thoughts. So it's all connected. Going back to like confirmation bias, it's like if you've ever been like, I want a Nissan. I want to get a red Nissan. And then all of a sudden you're just seeing red Nissans everywhere. Like
Yeah.
what you were aware of, like you'll start to notice more and more. Like for me, recently I've been like working on like self-esteem and self-confidence, and now that that's been a big focus, I'm aware of things that I do and I'm like, "Oh wow, like you are so confident," or "You have a lot of guts, like you have a lot of courage." And just finding ways to just confirm that, like, yeah, like I'm awesome. I love myself. I'm a cool person.
Now it's come to the question, so what do we do about these pesky thoughts that are causing us anxiety and all these negative thought patterns and things like that? I first, as someone that works in mental health, I feel the need to give a little mental health disclaimer. If you are struggling with really intense or ongoing or worsening thoughts that are majorly interfering with your life and overall well-being, please connect with a mental health professional. What we're saying is a lot of like our own thoughts and opinions and experiences, which I think can be helpful. And we've learned a lot of this in therapy and things like that. But I just want to make sure, like, if it's really interfering with your life, please see a mental health professional.
There's some mental health illnesses that just doing what we're talking about probably isn't going to solve it. Like, you might
Mm-hmm.
need extra care and attention, or you might need to be on medication. Like, we're not trying to discredit people with mental health issues. Like, Emma and I have mental
Mm-hmm.
health issues, but sometimes, like, there's more
Yeah.
that you have to do than just changing your thoughts, because sometimes you can't, like, your illness, sometimes you can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not saying we have all the answers here. We're also both in therapy right now. So, um, definitely, I'm a huge advocate for, yeah, finding the care that you need for, yeah, your mental health and overall well being.
And if you're struggling, we feel for you.
We've been there.
We're sending good vibes.
Mm-hmm.
So, Emma, how do I change these negative thoughts?
Okay, so this is what I kind of put together and just my kind of process of how I've dealt with it. Again, my experience is that I'm a very bad ruminator. I overthink everything. And this kind of process has helped me so much. So, the first thing I would say is just acceptance and non judgment. This is a term used a lot in mindfulness based practices. And it can be so hard to sit with your negative thought patterns, but it's necessary. You can't fight it. Just listen to it. Acknowledge it as a thought. Don't identify with it. Just listen to it. Don't place any weight or meaning on it. It's just a thought. Just breathe and listen. Don't judge, just accept. If you need kind of more assistance at realizing what this thought is, I think journaling is a good tool, and meditating as well can help notice those thoughts. And also, this is a misconception about meditation. A lot of people think when they first start to meditate that they need to turn all their thoughts off. That's not true. When you meditate, it's about noticing your thoughts. It's not about completely getting rid of your thoughts, because a lot of people get frustrated because they're like, I can't stop thinking. Well, that's kind of part of the process. So, yeah, the first step, notice, accept, don't put any weight into it. It's a thought, it's there.
Yeah, it's like a cloud passing by. Just look at it, let it pass by. We don't need to say that that's like a bad, ugly cloud. Like, we're just looking at them and acknowledging them.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say that kind of ties into the second step, which is letting go. Again, instead of fighting your thought, having a war with it, you're going to gently let it go. This thought probably served you at one point, either whether it was useful or not. I'm not saying that a anxious thought served you, but it had a purpose. It came into your mind for a reason, and you can acknowledge it's not useful anymore. So it's time to let go with love and care. What's really kind of helped with me is visualizing my thoughts, which kind of ties into what you said about a cloud floating by. So if I notice I'm getting stuck in the same mental loop, I'll visualize that thought in a cloud or like as a car passing by. My personal favorite is holding it like a bubble or something, and then, or not even, just an object, and then dropping it into a dark abyss and watching it go down into the depths. And I swear, I don't know why this visualization exercise works so well for me, but once I start dropping my thoughts down there, my brain just doesn't know what to do, and then I stop thinking in general. So, yeah, so that's kind of what I think is the letting go part of it, is finding a way to release it.
I've never heard the abyss one before, and that is actually genius. I think
Yeah.
I'm gonna use that.
Because I wanted one that was a little bit dark, like a darker way, because it's like a dark thought. So I'm like, I want to get rid of you, and I'm not going to be like, it's still like letting go of it gently.
Yeah, you're just like, see ya. Like, okay, bye. I acknowledged you, but bye.
See ya.
I can't see you at the bottom. It's really dark down there.
Yeah.
So after you let go of the thought, what's the next part?
The next step to me is, you've acknowledged it, it's gone now. Now is time for the radical change and the rewiring of your brain. So, what I try to do is when I have a negative thought, mainly about myself, because I'm super hard on myself, and I'll think something negatively, and then I'll automatically replace it with the opposite thinking. So, for example, I've been experiencing some self doubt this week. So, I am, my negative thought loop is like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I'm not really worthy of sharing my voice or things like that. And then I'll automatically replace it like, no, you are worthy. You can take up space. Your voice needs to be heard, deserves to be heard, and you are loved. And
You know a lot about this. It's like we're not experts, but we know enough to share like what has
mm-hmm,
helped us.
yeah.
So, yeah. I would like to also add in, sometimes we will have a negative thought about ourselves, and I don't think it's appropriate to right off the bat discredit it. I think when we have a thought and it's like negative, we should ask ourselves, like, is this true? Is
Mm,
this thought true? Because sometimes it might be true. It might be true. Like, as if it's like, oh, maybe I'm oversharing stuff. Yeah, Casey, you do overshare a lot. Maybe that person, and in that time and place, maybe you did overshare. Maybe we could be a
mm.
little more conscious before we speak. So don't just discredit everything. And if it is something negative that you do, or something negative about yourself, don't beat yourself up over it, but just having the acknowledgement and the awareness that it's there will help you be able to change it as well.
Yeah, I actually think that's a good point. Like, you can question it a little. You can be like, oh, maybe this thought actually has more meaning for me than I'd like to say. I was trying to think of how I would look at it, like if I had a thought, because a lot of life is gray area. It's not black and white. So
Mhm.
there sometimes you might think like something about yourself that you don't like about yourself, and yeah, maybe there is some type of truth for it, but then it's a good chance for you to evaluate what aligns with what you want to be as a person. And if that's not lining up with like how you would like to be, then that's a time to be like, okay, I'll change my behavior going forward.
Just because it may be true doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Like if you
Mhm.
are aware of something and you don't change it, you are choosing not to change. Like you are choosing to stay the same. You are choosing to have the same thoughts or to believe those same thoughts. Um, I think whenever I notice something that isn't one of my strong suits or that I can work on, I used to beat myself up really bad about it, but you're not going to hate yourself into changing.
Mhm.
So you have to give yourself some grace. So whenever I have like notice that, oh, I have this negative trait, I'll be like, okay, that's okay. Like we're learning and we are going to like work through changing this. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you suck. You're just a human and you're learning, and awareness is the first step to change.
Yeah. I totally agree. That's where I think a lot of people go wrong with mindfulness, and what I've seen from um, people that kind of end up using spirituality in a more toxic way is they use it as an excuse to not hold themselves accountable. But becoming aware of your thoughts doesn't mean you can just write them off like, oh, that's just a bad thought, it's not true, or something. Like sometimes there is truth to it because we're all human and we all make mistakes and we can all do better and grow as people. So again, we're not promoting toxic positivity here. We are all about growth and holding space for yourself, finding love for yourself, even through our shadow, which we're going to talk about coming up soon in another episode. Like, again, like going back to my example of self doubt, I've noticed the more you kind of catch yourself, replace it, say, no, I'm worthy, I'm loved, saying all those affirmations to yourself, the more kind of accustomed you'll get to it. And then new thoughts will start emerging that are more positive. Over 5 years ago, I would be talking negatively to myself almost 24/7. Everything I did was wrong to me. Now, I find myself saying affirmations to myself just randomly, like throughout the day, being like, no, I'm like loved, I'm worthy, all this stuff like that. So it's a practice. It's not going to come at first, especially if you're so used to being stuck in these patterns. But after years and years, you're going to look back and realize how far you've come.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I was saying I hate myself all the time. And now, like, I wouldn't dare say that about myself now. Adding to the rewiring your brain, you said like you replace a negative thought with a positive one. I call that battling my thoughts. Like, I feel like I'm at war with my thoughts sometimes. Like, yes, you can have a thought and you can let it go, but if you notice that this is like a reoccurring thought that you're having about yourself, like sometimes you gotta battle it. And it's a long battle sometimes. Like, I'll have a thought, like, I'm so bad at this. And immediately, it took me a while to get to this point, but immediately now, I think, like, I'm learning. I may not be the best at this now, but I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm going to get better. And it's really just reframing and changing your perspective on a thought. And that is kind of how you like rewire your brain, is like you have this thought and then you kind of dive deep into it and you're like, okay, is this true? Well, yeah, maybe I'm kind of like bad at it now, but it doesn't mean I'll always be bad at it. And it's kind of like you're reparenting yourself. Like if you heard your best friend or if you heard your child say what you're thinking to yourself, you would react so differently. You have to start thinking of yourself like your best friend or your child. And like if anyone talked to my best friend or the child that I talk to myself sometimes, they would be we'd be in a fight. I'd be throwing hands. I would be yelling. I'd be like, "How dare this person talk to you like this? Because you're like the best person on this earth. Like I would die without you. Like I love you and I can't believe someone said that to you." So you just have to get defensive about these thoughts and be like, "No. How dare you talk to me like that? Like we're going to change that thought. Like talk to yourself and break it down as if your friend came to you being like, okay, this person said this thing about me."
Yeah, I would never talk to the people in my life like the way that my thoughts talk to myself in my head. Yeah, that's a really good thing to keep in mind. I really like that.
Thank you. That was a big game changer for me too.
Mhm.
Like you and I have been practicing this for a while and I feel like we can both notice like changes in each other. I feel like when I first you have lived, I feel like so many different lives. Like
I
you have
have.
grown. Like you are a flower and like you are just like blossoming.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I feel like we always had this part of us, but we just weren't aware of it. And then finding that awareness, it, yeah, blossomed.
Yeah. You can really believe whatever you want. Like for the longest time we believed Santa Claus was real. Like we fully believed that. Like if we can believe in Santa Claus, like we can believe in positive good things for us.
Hmm.
I feel like we also have to be careful of like delusion.
We're a little delulu here, but a
Yeah.
healthy amount.
I think it's good to be a healthy amount of like delusional.
My philosophy on that is that if it's not hurting yourself or others and it's not a detriment to your day to day life, go ahead. Yeah, as long as your main goal is kindness and love and not hurting anybody else, believe what you want to believe, and you're allowed to believe that you deserve love and that you are worthy of the things that you want. And it's so personal to me. I never felt like I deserved anything like good in my life. And these thoughts stick around that are programmed from a young age. Like, I still can't shake some of these anxious thoughts, but they're still there, but I don't give them any weight anymore. Like, I don't believe them anymore, but they're still like I find myself just randomly thinking, "Oh, you suck. You're a terrible person." And then I have to be like, "No. What are you doing here? Like get out of here. You're not welcome here anymore."
There's the door, bitch. Get out.
I've
One
had
of
to do that this week, literally. Like
Oh
I'll be
yeah.
like, "Why am I think no, stop."
There's there's one thought that I keep having of like you're lazy. You're so
Mm,
lazy. Like why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you doing this? Like why don't you have like a better job or like blah blah blah. And I'm like just because I can't see the progress that I'm making doesn't mean that there isn't progress being made or just because I'm not being productive 24/7 doesn't mean that I'm lazy. Like,
mhm.
I feel like our definitions of things could be skewed sometimes. Like, it's not lazy to take time for yourself and to relax because you're recharging and to do stuff that you love because it gives you energy to keep going. Like, life is supposed to be fun. Like we're not supposed to just work our life away and be unhappy like our whole life. Like what is that about? So yeah, it just we've been doing this for years and we still have reoccurring thoughts, but I feel like
Yeah.
just becoming aware of it and like battling it, like it's getting easier and easier, and I feel like our
Mm-hmm.
lives are shifting a lot because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. This awareness has been such a gift to me and helped me listen to that true inner voice inside me. And now I just feel like everything in my life came together once I decided to stop believing what those thoughts that persisted and started believing what I actually knew to be true but couldn't hear over the chatter.
Yeah. And I think you can tell when a thought is true to you and when a belief is true to you, like you can feel it in your body. There's just some things like I feel deep down, like in my intuition, to be true. And when something isn't true, I feel repelled by it.
It's really just about awareness. I keep going back to that, but once you kind of tune in and listen, you you will pick up on what feels true and what is kind of a manifestation of negative experiences or things that have been told to you, things stemming from anxiety, depression, all of that.
Fear.
Yes. I've heard this thing that fear, so you think hate is the opposite of love, but it's actually fear. Fear and love are opposite. And so if it's coming from a place of like a fear based thought, you'll know. And again, I also wanted to tie in the thought, emotion, sensation triangle because you can also feel how it feels in your body. And that's why body scan meditations are so good because, again, for example, the negative thought patterns manifest in my body as a pit in my stomach or like tense shoulders or like a hot face, like my blood pressure is going up, whereas thoughts that are true to me feel like bliss. Like my whole body feels relaxed, my muscles are relaxed. If you're ever wondering where a thought is truly stemming from, it could be worth it to explore like somatic therapy, which is basically body therapy, tuning into your body's natural processes, because then you can maybe even get to the root of it just from your feelings in your body.
Also, just figuring out like, why do I have this thought and why do I have this belief? And figuring out what in
Mm-hmm.
my life made me believe this.
Yeah. Do you think it might be a good time to start wrapping things up?
Yeah. The more you practice this, the easier it will become. It will happen quicker and quicker, and your whole mindset will change, and your whole life will change. You just have to keep practicing and give yourself grace. You're learning this, and I don't know why we weren't taught this in school. I have my theories about the government, but that's another episode. So yeah, just give yourself grace, practice this. Um, a question for you to ponder and journal about: what are some thought patterns that are no longer serving me? And in what ways can I facilitate catching them, letting them go, and replacing them?
And just wrapping up here, some episodes to come. Our next one will be all about manifesting, law of attraction, and law of assumption. We also have some coming up about understanding yourself and things to do with self love, child self, shadow work.
If you want to share the answer to the question that you're pondering, we do have a Reddit where you can share that. It will be linked in our description, as well as all our social media. If you want to give us a follow, we'll be posting a little extra stuff. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Peace and love.